Arts and Humanities. And big thank you to our panel tonight who've come out on what has been our first in-person event for so long, and might also be the last for a while. We'll wait and see what happens with that. Let's hope not. But yeah, so thanks for coming, and thank you to the panel. It's lovely to see you. So if we just start off, if you'd just like to introduce yourselves and a bit about what you do, and then I'll sort of ask a few questions, and then we'll open it up to questions from the audience as well.
Yeah, so I'll start. So I'm Tyler. I'm a freelance videographer. So it's my full-time job. So I do all things camera related. I'm a motion graphics designer as well, and a drone operator. So if it involves moving image, it's essentially my job. So yeah, that's me in a nutshell, really.
I'm Kasia, I'm an alum of Kent. I work here at Kent, and then in my spare time, I'm also a freelance project manager and evaluator, and I also do some sign language stuff, training to be an interpreter, and something else. I work for Kent Association for the Blind as well, so I write 4 or 5 different things going on.
And hello, my name is Freddie, and I'm a freelance teacher, which basically means teaching different places, including for the university, here, as well as online for a few other organisations in various capacities. And other than that, I'm also into stocks and shares, property, and a few other bits. So I wear quite a few hats, like everyone.
I'm Sabina Desir. I do several things, or wear several hats. I'm a vocalist. I run a heritage and arts organisation that takes black-centred stories or lesser-known stories and turns them into projects that have multi-strands. One of those projects is here. That one there, it's called Freedom Road, and that's a show that I have produced and created. And this show here is also one of mine, which was called The Jazz Ambassadors, which again, I wasn't in this one, and that show was about the Cold War in the US. It was music and film. And also I do exhibitions. I've got an exhibition going into Turner next year, so I do several things, wear several different hats.
Seems to be a theme, doesn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. Maybe that's the first thing we learn about freelancing, that you need to have your finger in lots of different pies. Yeah, that's great. So thank you very much, and it's great that we've got such a good range of different things that people are doing, so it shows the range that you can do as a freelancer. So can you tell us a little bit about your what a typical day for you might look like, if there is a typical day?
Are we going down the line? So I'll probably tick off most of the things that we'll all say. The easy answer is there is no typical day. I'm kind of speaking for the group, and that probably in that a lot of us, do different things. So for me, this week alone, I was spending my entire Monday just editing content for the Royal Air Force. So editing aeroplanes and all that kind of things. And then I was doing a day of subtitling. Today I'm here. I'm also on a tech day today. So I've just been doing prep for a shoot I've got tomorrow, which rolls into Friday and things like that. So it's a whole mixed bag. It's usually kind of I'm either editing, prepping, or filming, or a combination of all three. Or if I'm on that rare occasion where I've not got anything to do, I'm preparing myself for the future and building myself up and building up my name and what it is. But yeah, that's kind of almost like more of a typical week, I suppose, because that's kind of how it kind of pulls together. But yeah, it might be different for you guys, obviously.
Yeah, similar in that there is no typical day really. It depends on who I'm working with, what projects I've got going on, whether it's like a flood of projects or a kind of drought of projects, in which case I might do kind of taxes and things
The
like
fun
that.
stuff.
Yeah, the fun stuff that still needs to be done, and meeting with people and networking and promoting myself and whatever. Or I could be bid writing or evaluating a project, looking at loads of boring data lines, or I could be with a team talking about how it's going to work, creating marketing material. It just depends on what I'm doing really. So, and that's kind of around a day job as well. So it just depends. It completely depends on what the project is and where we're at with that project.
Yeah, I'd say I think it's more seasonal. So for example, for me, some of the time of the year I might be teaching for Kent University, but I'm not doing that all of the year. So it would be a typical season, for example. So the busiest time of year for me is summer. So a busy day in summer would be, say, mid-July would be completely different from a busy day in January. So it really does vary, and that sort of variety is probably one of the biggest pluses. But free time doesn't necessarily mean that you want to do too much if you're not too busy. And you never know, because bookings could be last minute, and equally you could get something that cancels. So you might have got a really busy day today, and then you don't know, actually I'm entirely free.
Yeah. We plan everything, and then someone says, actually, we're going to do that tomorrow. Oh, okay, I'll just change everything. That's fine.
Yeah, for me, much like the rest of the panel, I don't really have a typical week, but a week could be speaking to different venues, trying to book the tour, booking the best musicians that I can find for the tour, having a weekly meeting with different organisations that I'm working with, bid writing in terms of, always trying to raise money for different things. It could be rehearsing, it could be trying to bring people on board to carry out a specific strand of the project. For example, today I was speaking to a director that runs an organisation that collates oral histories connected to the military, families and communities connected to military. And so I was speaking to him in regards to gathering the oral histories on my project. So it really, really varies from day to day.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. And so, can you tell us a little bit about how you got into, or why you decided to go freelance, or how you got into it in the first place?
Yeah, so mine's a bit of an interesting, I'll keep it brief. So I graduated in summer of 2019, so not that long ago compared to potentially some of the rest of us. So I'm a bit of a baby face here. The sad part of it is me and a bunch of others in the company I used to work for were made redundant just because of the pandemic, and I decided, right, well, I've got my car to pay for, my flat to pay for, my bills. What do I do now? I've not got a job. So I thought, right, well, I'll pick up some freelance work on the side, because I did it through uni as well, so I had quite a bit of a client base to pull from. And then I thought, right, I'll use that as a quick earner whilst I'm looking for a full-time job. And it just kept going and going and going, and I found that I then dipped into a full-time job for a few weeks, didn't enjoy it, found I could earn more and have more freedom doing what I do now. And my dad's always been a freelancer in structural engineering and architecture, so I've seen kind of a bit more of the lifestyle of it, and so I just kind of carried on doing it. And film has been my passion for quite a while now, and that's why I studied at uni, so it kind of was a natural route through. So yeah, that's kind of, and now I'm here now. So but yeah, I've only been freelancing for about a year and a half, so that kind of puts it into perspective, the scale of things. So, but yeah.
For me, I kind of accidentally became a freelancer. Like I don't think I even really recognised I was one for a bit. I was doing my PhD here at Kent, and somebody asked me to do some teaching, but I wasn't contracted, so they asked me to get a unique tax reference, which is what you would need to be a sole trader, and so that I could get paid for this teaching job. So I did that, and then like a couple of months later, someone asked me to do some consultancy regarding my research, and they're like, "Do you have a unique tax reference? Can you invoice?" I was like, "Oh yes, I do actually. Yeah, that's fine. I'll invoice you." And then a couple of other little things came up. Oh, can you do some research here? Can you do a bit of project here? And I was like, yeah, sure. And I remember saying to somebody, like, oh, I've got this project that I'm doing this project. And they're like, oh, you're a freelancer. I was like, no, I just do the odd like project. No, I am a freelancer. And so it sort of grew from there. And then I started like actively looking for stuff rather than it just being sort of like, oh, why did you do this? Or do you know that Kasia does that sort of stuff? So and I'm still sort of doing a almost full-time job alongside it. So I don't really call myself a proper freelancer now, because I do just sort of pick and choose the jobs I'm going to do, rather than like actively go out and seek stuff.
Yeah, I would say for me it was very much a lifestyle choice. So not an accident, a very conscious decision. So I started life as a mainstream secondary school teacher, and I didn't like it, to say, to sort of summarize. So I love teaching, being, you know, a teacher, transferring knowledge and passion for a subject, but I didn't like any of the sort of the government requirements, you know. In mainstream education, the goalposts are always changing. You know, if you think the government have handled COVID badly, then look at the education record. So yeah, it's just not fun. And I don't know what a good lesson is changed from when I qualified, when I was teaching. So I thought, well, I don't want to do this for my whole life, but I like teaching. I like the art of, you know, being in a classroom, transferring knowledge, you know, that sort of thing. So I moved from mainstream teaching into the EFL world, which is English as a foreign or a second language, and that by its nature tends to be more contract-based work. So I worked for a number of employers, and I got myself, it probably took a year or two maybe to get into a good routine, where I worked with different employers different times of the year. I did a lot of teaching overseas on short contracts, so it gave me the variety of being able to spend, say, half of the year working overseas, half of the year working in the UK, so I get to keep my sort of social life, keep all the connections and stuff here, so quite a lot of variety. So for me, conscious lifestyle choice, and it enabled me to basically live at least half of my life for sort of 7 years in different exciting European cities.
And airports mostly.
A lot of airports, yeah. But yeah, lifestyle for me.
Well, I came from, I guess, a child freelance route, because I went to theatre school full time from age 10, and so I started working in that industry at age 10, doing musical theatre in the West End and stuff. So I did that and music videos, and then I trained as an opera singer, and I did some work with opera companies. And then I left that and became a banker. And I had a son, my oldest son I had, I guess, pretty early, who's now 30. And so I became a banker and paid for his education and put him through school. And then I went back to what I felt was my purpose, working in music. So I actually went back to freelancing as a vocalist, first of all. And just as I started building that again, I was working in jazz. Other opportunities came up, or I would see an avenue or see something that I felt could or should be happening, and then I would decide to work in that field. So I went from jazz vocalist to jazz promoter to producer and to artistic director. All of those roles have been freelance, and also as a freelancer, my feeling is that you have to create opportunities, and I felt more so as a woman, and one of the reasons I started the Heritage and Arts organisation was for ownership as well, ownership of my work, because I was producing work for other people, and I wanted to own the work that I was producing. So yeah, that's kind of my route in a nutshell, I guess.
Okay, brilliant, thank you. Can you tell us a little bit about how you manage your time and your workload, and possibly your budget, you know? Yeah, sure.
I guess it would be quite. This is probably the one where it's going to start to diversify, because obviously for me it's my only thing that I do. It is my full-term income and job. So I have to be quite. I don't have to manage it around a part-time or a full-time job or anything like that, which has its benefits and its negatives. Negatives are when there's no work, what do you do? And you will find periods of times as a freelancer where, whether you're doing it part-time or full-time, where there isn't something to do, whether that's one day or 1 week where you've got no work on. But I suppose, yeah, managing time is. I'm one of those old-fashioned people that still uses old-fashioned paperback diary, so I write down in my planner what I've got to do. If I've got a client work coming up, especially so this summer, for example, is a good example. I had shoots pretty much every single week, some in Scotland, some in the Midlands, some down here, all around the UK. So I have to go, right, where have I got to be on what day, when have I got to travel, when have I got to come back, when am I going to fit in all the editing time for all these shoots that I'm doing as well. And I just look at a diary and go, right, that's a half day for this, that's a half day for that, that's a full day or a full week for X, Y, and Z, and that's kind of how I do that. And then when it comes down to finances, that's a whole, we could probably do a whole night on the funds and the budgeting of it. So it's a challenge, it's, especially for me, because as a freelancer, when you work full-time or part-time, you know when your money's coming in, so you know that on the last day of the month or the last week of the month, that's when your income's coming in. So a freelancer, it comes in when it comes in, and you have to, that's a real struggle to plan with. So knowing, right, okay, how long can I survive without a penny coming through the door? Because if all my clients decide I'm not going to pay my invoice until the last day, you might be going 4 weeks without a penny coming in, and then it all comes in one go. So answering that's a challenge, but yeah, balancing that is another thing I think that is interesting. But yeah, that's kind of how I balance my life. And then finding personal time and time off is, it comes when it comes. If you do a 7-day week, I'll do sometimes a 14-day week, and it just doesn't stop, and sometimes I get a week off and you just have to fit in your friends and family around that. And it sometimes will reach a point where you've got to do it the other way around and try and squeeze in a personal day to see people because you've been off the record for 3 months. And you go, I should probably go and see mum and dad and say hello. But yeah, that's kind of, yeah, how it goes. But it might be different for you guys, I think.
I think because I work 4 days a week, and I have classes for my sign language 1 day every other week. So in that respect, I have like quite a strict boundary of time that I can dedicate to freelance, which is good because it means I'm not bleeding into other periods. Because I think there is a risk as a freelancer, like you just said, that you can be working 2 weeks and have a day off, or so that can be a risk, and you obviously have to manage your mental health and your well-being as well, because no one else is going to manage that for you as a freelancer. So it's helpful because I know I can only do this, I can only work for you on these days, but then inevitably it does bleed into evenings and weekends, and I do have a very understanding wife, which helps. And there are times when it's super busy and I am working, I finish my job at 5 o'clock and then I'm working till 9, 10 o'clock on freelance stuff, but then other times when, like I say, there's not much coming in and I can, have a social life and all that kind of stuff. So it does just depend. And then in terms of like managing my time day to day, it kind of depends on what the project needs. And there'll be times where I've got loads of busy stuff to do, and then I'm waiting for other stuff to come in from other people in the project. So because I'm a project manager, I kind of do loads of stuff, and then I'm keeping an eye on what other people are doing. So it just depends on that, and managing the specific deadlines for that project and what needs to be done and when, and being realistic about what's actually achievable in the time frame. So yeah, it just kind of depends on what's going on at the time.
Yeah, I think managing time is very difficult, especially if you're essentially working with, or you'll have lots of different clients, and each client might represent a different amount of your total workload. So at one stage, one client might be worth about 50% of your workload, and you might have another client who's worth about 1%. So it's difficult to manage. You do have to sort of choose to prioritise sometimes, and that can be difficult to do. I think really the only way that it makes it's manageable is to have a very well crafted calendar system. So I'm the opposite to how some people on this panel I think prefer the paper. I have everything on my iPhone, iCalendar, which is synced to my MacBook, iPad, iPhone. So luckily it's very good that Apple has that integration. I mean, other services do too. But if it wasn't digital, then I would struggle to keep track. So I can look at it and it's all color-coded. And I can see, okay, this is what I'm doing today. I need to be on this place at this time, this Zoom call here. I need to be on Microsoft Teams at this time, as is the current sort of situation. So, and the calendar links in. So normally you can go straight from the calendar to the place you need to be. So I think it's essential to have some sort of system, whatever works for you. I also use like project management tool called Trello, which is free to use. You can make it your own, you can make little lists, you can use lots of sections. That makes life very easy, and you can invite other people. So if you're working with other people on some projects but not others, you can invite them to some boards and they can see that. So it's good for collaborative working like that. So I think you need to have very practical ways to make it work, because otherwise it's very difficult.
Google Drive is good for that as well, because you
Yeah.
can share folders with people, specific people, for file sharing and stuff.
Yeah, I think it's anything you can do to make life easy managing time, because you can also get last minute cancellations, bookings, things can fall through, so it's got to have a way to manage that really, and it is difficult. Managing the budget is less difficult for me because a lot of it is smaller clients, so a lot of students come to me individually, as individuals, not as a business. So having lots of different clients as well as business clients means that there's always some money coming in. So I don't have that as a problem in the same way that other people might do, but again, that's all organised through spreadsheets and various accounting software. I use one called Free Agent, everyone else uses that on this panel. It's designed for freelancers, actually.
Shocking.
That's really quite good. So yeah, you need to keep track of it and use any system that works for you.
Time management, I find I have to be highly organised to deliver what I want to deliver in the time frames in which I'm working to, and every project that I'm working on or I create is in collaboration with others. So there are always meetings around time frames. That probably happens on a weekly basis. And trying to manage my commitments outside of work for my son who's 9 years old. So the truth is that I'm always juggling. That's the reality of life, is that even though I'm highly organised and I don't ever not know what I'm doing, my days are so meticulously planned, going from meeting to meeting, and all the other things that I do, and getting rehearsals in there. That's the only way that I could push any of my projects forward, is by being highly organised and managing that. I mean, at the moment, my diary is planned up until the end of January 2023, because I'm working a year ahead with my projects. So for a project to be delivered in October 22, which is quite a big project, that's a year and a half in planning, and then after that project finishes, you need to deliver reports and all types of things after the project. So you do need to be highly organised if you're leading a project, because not only are you leading that project, I think your attitude will influence your team and the people that you're working with. And in terms of budgets, I'm always managing, I guess, several budgets at once, depending on how many projects I'm running at once. But for me, my life as a banker kind of has had a massive influence on people management and managing budgets, because I was managing such large sums as a banker, and all the roles that I did within banking, which I kind of left that and had no idea that I'd be able to use any of those skills again. But what I've discovered, doesn't matter what job you've done in your life, there'll be elements of whatever roles you've done that will be transferable skills, whatever they are, whether you're working in a shop or retail or banking or whatever, you'll be able to take those skills and reapply them. So yeah, that's kind of pretty much how my time is, and a real brief on, I haven't told you anything about managing budgets. I don't think it's worth telling you, it would be so boring. Not exciting at all, but pretty much I just oversee what's going on a daily basis.
I would just add to say, so you said something really interesting there about that you take things from different experiences in your life and from different roles, and I think that is the beauty of freelancing, is that it's completely moldable to your experience and your skill set. And there might be times where you identify that there's a gap, like, okay, maybe I'm not so good at budget management, maybe I need to get some skills or experience in that area, or hire a freelancer to help you, or a project manager to help you. So, not plug that. But you do get to kind of really show off your whole range of skills and sort of mould the business to what you're good at and what you enjoy doing. That's the great part of being a freelancer. Question?
Yeah.
Is it like, can we do questions?
Yes, exactly. Yeah.
Cool. I don't know, I came like a bit later to this event, but I don't know if you talked about beginning as freelancers. You already went through it. Then I'm gonna ask.
Oh, we can do it again.
Yeah, we can tell you afterwards.
Or afterwards, yes.
It'll be on video as well.
There you go. The long and short of it was we all came to it through different means and at different times, and some of us in a very structured, this is what I want to do kind of way, and some others like me kind of accidentally became freelancers.
I was just going to add, it kind of comes into startup and what we've just been talking about actually, and it kind of comes into finance, but it's mostly about finance, but depending on what obviously freelance path you're going to do. So for me, I've got quite large overhead costs of, I can't turn up to a shoot as I am, I need all my equipment with me. So whereas some roles, you may not spend that much money every year on other stuff, I spend thousands a year on equipment, and okay, a lot of what I do, you need to know how to do without the equipment, and it doesn't matter what kit you're working with, you've got to be able to adjust to it. But there comes a stage where if you're charging thousands and thousands of pounds for content, you do need the kit to back it up, and you do need to invest that money. So, I mean, perfect example for me was that I was getting loads of requests for drone stuff, because that's kind of the flavour of the year, or the decade, as it were. And I was sort of looking at, right, how much is it going to cost me to become a licensed pilot, and how much is it going to cost me to get the aircraft and insurance and all the rest of it. And that's one thing you've got to factor in, is right, this is how much it's going to cost me, how do I get to there, and at what point do I pull that trigger? And that's another factor, depending on where you're going to, is what the assets that you're accumulating, the equipment that you use, and finding that progression through, and yeah, so I just thought I'd tack that on, because that's one thing that we actually haven't touched on yet. So
Yeah, thanks.
Maybe if I can anchor another question to it, because I don't know, like I have this image of being a freelancer, of like having your backpack and it's you against the world, kind of, a bit like guerrilla cinema, but like and I think your schedules are also very, very, very tight. I wouldn't say even as tight as working 40 hours a week, even more, I would guess. So what would you say are maybe the pros and cons of that, of having like that liberty, but it also may sound as you have like less free time?
Kind of covered that bit as
Yeah.
well.
Well, the thing is, as a freelancer, is that you are making those choices yourself. You're not in a situation where, when you're employed, you are committed, you've committed to deliver. When you're freelance, there's the flexibility of changing those schedules. So even though the schedules are tight, it's my choice that that schedule is built in the way that I've decided to build it, because of the end game. But the other thing is that there is to bear in mind that there's an evolution within the process. It doesn't start that way. And the other, I'm just picking up on, what's your name? Tyler, sorry, I'm terrible with names. Picking up on what Tyler said about money. And I would say as well, that don't let money be the thing that puts you off making a choice in regards to your careers. Because in my experience, money comes way down the line in terms of what needs to be in place before you even get near the budgets. So money, and I say that through experience because if that was something that was a focus of mine early on in my life and in my career, and it was something that stopped me taking chances, and it stopped me taking risks, and it actually hindered my career for a long time because if I was kind of hanging around the how, and the how wasn't really the question that needed all the focus, it was the idea to begin with, and the energy and the intention that's going to take you to the how. And that's there, you know. So I put projects together, and I'm not advising people to do this, but I also come from a community as a black person that traditionally in this country has had to work outside of particular boundaries. So funding wasn't always available to people from my community, and so we have had to think really creatively in terms of putting creative projects together. And thinking creatively makes you really think about how you're going to achieve something. And what I learned through that was that money wasn't the thing that was the driving force. Money gives you choices, definitely, but it's not the thing that really, in my experience, it's not the thing to focus on in terms of actually achieving something. I've achieved projects. I did a project in London probably about, I don't know, four or 5 years ago, and I was advised by the director of Sony, the ex-director of Sony Jazz, huge record company, not to do this project and that I'd probably fail. And that I wouldn't really do well in this project if I did it in London. And he gave me all the reasons why I shouldn't do it, money being one of them, and I had no money, and I delivered that project. I sold out that project because I listened to myself. I just knew I could make it happen, and I knew it didn't tick all the traditional boxes, but that was, for me, that was the reason to do it. And I did it, and it was really, really successful, and it's just an example of what can be achieved just through intention and drive. So don't let money be the thing that puts you off your idea or your purpose.
Yeah, and you're talking about working 40 hours, which you may well do regardless of what you choose. But there's a big difference between choosing how you're going to do those 40 hours, whereas following the procedure. So someone says, you must do it this way. If you're an employee, and especially if you're a low-level employee, you've got very little control about how you do a task. As a freelancer, you're making all the decisions. So it's not the number of hours; it's how you're using them, and you're in control. Also, you reap the reward. So if you do a great job on a freelance project, then you're going to get a good review. They might pass it on, word of mouth. You directly benefit. You don't get a, oh, thank you for your help. You've raised company profits by 0.01. So it's about the reward. You see the direct reward, however you structure your enterprise. And also, you don't have to do a 40-hour week. Originally, I started freelancing for lifestyle, and I did as little work as I could because I was, spending time in places like, Vienna, Milan. I teach as little as I could in the day, and I go out and go to cafes, bars, restaurants. So you don't need to do that. I mean, as I've got older, I sort of shifted my focus, and like this has been a 40-hour week. But when I started, the objective was completely opposite. So it can evolve with you, and the number of hours is not the way to look at it.
It's also about managing expectations as well. If you don't think that you can do a 40-hour week that week, or because you're doing other bits, you've got other projects on, then it's about communicating that to your commissioned, like whoever's commissioning you. So if you've got jobs to do and they give you an outline of what they want, but it is up to you as a freelancer to say, well, I can do that completely as you like it, or actually I can only do it if these tweaks happen, because I've got my own time frames. Because commissioners don't think about your schedule, they don't think about the other projects that you're doing. So it's up to you to sort of set your boundaries and say, I absolutely can do this project, but it won't be finished by March, it will be June, or whatever.
Or you could outsource the bits you don't like to another freelance.
That's true. Like me.
You got any other questions? Yep.
I just wanted to ask Tyler a question because I'm a first year film student and like one of my passions is editing, and like the whole reason I came to uni was like to find out if I had any like other passions in film, because I knew I liked film and I knew I liked editing, but I was thinking like I feel like I need more like experience and knowledge about other things. So like just a rundown of like how editing and like filming is as a freelancer.
So obviously a huge portion of what I do is editing, but I do editing predominantly for social content rather than film. I have done film editing, but it's not a remit I touch on too much. So I started as a cinematographer in film, so working with the head of the camera department, and through the camera department, and that's what I still do actually as a semi-passion, and I do get paid for it from time to time, but when I've got time I will go out and do film stuff, and that's how I learned to edit, which sounds really bizarre, but doing it on set and working around the camera department, because you learn how things stitch together, and then going into the edit room, and really just, I wasn't taught to edit ever, and I edit on about 4 or 5 different software regularly. I didn't learn how to edit in terms of someone sat me down and said, right, you press this button and it does this thing. YouTube videos and online stuff, and then just sitting and pressing buttons until things happen, and giving it patience. I mean, I can pull an edit together now for a client sometimes that asks me for something, and it will take me an hour. 5 years ago that would have taken me all day. So just sitting with it and finding your way through an edit and going out there and experiencing things. And when you see things in real life, they help when you get into the edit room to pull things together. So yeah, I hope that kind of answers the question.
I would add to that as well, that kind of transfers to the whole of freelancehood, in that there will be parts of freelancing that you don't know, and things that you don't know how to do. Because as a freelancer, you are your entire organisation, you are your own marketing department, you're your own finance department, you're your own business developer, all of that, besides the actual job that you do for projects. So you kind of have to either learn how to do that, or have the money to pay people like me to come in and project manage the stuff that you don't know how to do. So, it might not be something that you're particularly interested in, who loves learning about taxes, but in order to do those things grassroots and save yourself some money, but also to upskill yourself, you kind of have to learn as you go and try different things. And I didn't know how to do taxes until like 2 weeks before my first tax deadline.
Oh, I still don't.
And I called a freelance friend of mine and was like, what does this mean? So it just, you learn as you go a lot of the time, and the more that you learn about being your own business, the easier it becomes, and then you can sort of upskill in different areas. And like you were saying earlier, that the experiences you have from other roles and the projects that you do, you're learning more and more as you go. And then you can kind of open out your reach, your skills.
Yeah, and even if you might think editing's what you love doing now, that might change by the end of your degree, or you might join a society and that might give you some idea, and you might decide to go a different route. I don't think you have to stick to one thing necessarily. I had no idea when I was a first year what sort of career direction I want to go.
Still don't.
You know, so yeah, I think keep an open mind, and you can almost freelance anything really. I mean, like a teacher isn't something you consider to be freelance, but you know, it can be.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna keep ranting on questions until you're tired. But I don't know if you also touched that topic, but how do you calculate like the value of your work?
That's an interesting one. By asking other friends who do similar things, kind of. Sometimes it's dictated by the project. So sometimes there'll be an advert or an opportunity or something that says you get this amount of money for this project. And then you kind of have to decide, okay, well that means I'll put this amount of hours in, depending on what you've charged previously. Or so for example, one company that I work with, I have like 3 different rates for that particular company, because sometimes they ask me to just project manage, and other times they ask me to like do bid writing and fundraising and other things, and sometimes they ask me to do so it depends on like the scale of expertise for that particular thing that I'm doing as to whether I charge them that amount or that amount to some extent. And then sometimes I'm like, okay, that's a mixture of things, so I'll just go in the middle, and so it kind of it changes. Like, so as I say, if there's something that's particularly complicated, then I might charge a bit more, or if it's something that I really don't want to do, I might charge a bit more. Something that I'm going to have to go and figure out how to do it.
Yeah. So you just like you say, you just research the market, but also you choose the sector you want to work in. So are you going to be cheap? Are you going to offer yourself, undercut other people to get loads of business, or are you going to go market yourself at the high end, have fewer clients, but they'll be higher value, or somewhere in the middle? So you can make conscious decisions. So, for example, in my field, I'm charging towards the high end, not the highest, towards the high end for my services. So that's a conscious decision. But even then, I've got some clients who pay me significantly less because either maybe there's someone who started with me early when the price was low, there was a special offer or something. Mixed rates, yeah. Or just people I like. I mean, you can do that. You have a list price, then you can negotiate. And equally, the opposite can be true. Like I've got a client who was so happy with the service, they actually offered to pay double, completely unsolicited.
Yeah, can we have details of that?
I've still got. Yeah, she's a lovely lady from Hong Kong. Still, actually, I had a class with her only today, in fact. So, yeah, it's not necessarily about what you think, how other people think. And I don't know. I mean, sometimes I even get tipped sometimes. So, I don't know that that's necessarily for everyone in the freelancing world, and I'm perhaps an outlier. But yeah, so it very much depends, I think, on the industry as well as other factors, but you can still make a conscious decision where you place yourself in the market.
There is some, what you just said about having sort of people that you like as well, there are sometimes strategic decisions. So again, as an organisation I work with, who I kind of call a gatekeeper organisation, i.e. they don't have a lot of money, they're a quite small company, but they know a lot of people in that world, they've recommended me for stuff before, so I charge them quite a reasonable rate, because I know they can't really afford much more, but I know that I'm going to continue to get business from them and their friends. So I strategically make the decision to charge them less.
That's something that I have to do on quite a regular basis, is I will evaluate a client and go, right, is this a one-time thing, is this a long-term thing? So a client I've just finished doing some work for, I can't name them because they're very well known, I'm still in negotiations for a contract, but I did a job for them at what I would pretty much call cost price for next to nothing. If you looked at the final figure, it was still quite a high number, but in terms of the amount that I took home at the end of the day, it was quite low. Purely because I knew that they were trying to decide whether or not they wanted a 12-month retainer over one job, and they were sort of looking at the numbers, and I said, look, let's do it at a nice low price. If you like the content, fine. And now I'm looking at a 6-figure contract with them. I don't make that much, but that was the contract that I'm looking at with them. And it was pretty much, we were on the shoot, and we were sat in the location we're filming, and the MD or the person running it basically goes, yeah, I think we're going to go for the full year. I was like, brilliant, I'll celebrate. But it's picking your battles and knowing where. And sometimes if I know a client, almost if I don't want to do the job because I don't necessarily have the time or whatever, sometimes I'll just go, right, I'm going to add an extra 50% margin to that, and if they go yes, quid's in, if not, then walk away from it. But picking your rate, I mean, for my industry, there's certain rates. There are standard rates which equates with you work in film. You have standard rates that you're supposed to be provided, which takes that out of the equation for you. But as it's been mentioned on the panel already, you can't. There is a horrible balance of knowing your worth and making sure that you're earning enough to do what you want to do. I mean, I need to charge a certain amount to continue doing what I love doing, but it's not my driving point. My driving force for what I do is that I get to keep doing it, and I love what I do because every week is just bizarre, whether I'm filming with Formula 1 cars or aeroplanes or with fancy rich people or whatever it is, and they're taking me out to dinner. Great, I get to keep doing that, but it can't be your driving force. But then, alternatively, on the other side of it, you have to find enough to scrabble together to make ends meet for you, whatever that figure kind of looks like. But I mean,
I do just for the money.
and if that's what you want to do,
then
then,
yeah, that's it.
I just pay for the new camera.
So maybe as a sort of final question or a final round-up, what do you think is the best thing and possibly the worst thing about freelancing?
I'll start that side.
What do I love the fact that I have built multi-strands of income, and I think that's really important as a freelancer, or even somebody running an organisation, that you are able to do more than one job, and so that you can literally hop between. So I personally, I earn money as a vocalist, I earn money as an artistic director, I earn money as a producer. So when I go on tour next year, I get paid for those 3 separate roles. And I think that's quite important. And to you as a jazz vocalist, it's not. I would strongly advise you to say it's not enough in terms of what really will get you work is. So, for example, the jazz sessions that I ran here at the Gulbenkian opened up my network overnight. So as a jazz vocalist, in terms of what you're saying, how do I access these musicians, one of the ways in which I did that was moving from being a vocalist to being the person that actually gave them work.
Yeah, which is funny because I have set up a recording studio at home, so I've started that, but it's a whole new ball game.
Yeah.
So I'm trying to kind of expand in that kind of sense.
But then that made it turned the tables, because then those people that I wanted to get actually wanted to get hold of me. So it's kind of maybe just thinking a little bit outside of the role that you want to work in.
So how long did you kind of study? We did a show here this Sabina Desir, it was kind of a while back now, but there was a lady, a musical director, and I asked her about kind of opera singing. How long did you kind of study for? Also, was it very expensive? Because she was like, don't. She was like, bugger off, don't.
No. Well, one, I started as a child, pretty young, so I kind of went into musical theatre and had training there, but I never stopped training, to be quite honest with you. So even now, at my grand old age of I'm still, I've never reached a point where I think, I don't really need to do anything. I think, you're always evolving. And there's many routes you can actually get training. So I first of all got training with a student of Pavarotti's for free, because I sent them a letter and just said, this is my situation, but I really want to do this, could you help me? And then I got so it depends on yourself, and just sometimes putting yourself out there, really.
I feel very, it's very kind of eclectic, and I always felt that as being impeding kind of force, the fact that, you know, liking various different jobs and whatever, not knowing where to put my hat.
Mm.
But I can tell different things, some people kind of say that that's a very good thing if you're a collective. You could,
That's a strength, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
So it's definitely a strength, I think.
Cool.
As a jazz vocalist, I know the fact that I've been classically trained
yeah.
has impacted positively me as a jazz vocalist. So
Yeah. Cool.
the thing is just be yourself.
Yeah.
That's it.
Cool.
Like it.
Yeah, so I guess for me the biggest advantage would be having autonomy and control. So even if you're doing a lot of work, you're doing it for yourself and you ultimately benefit, and that's very tangible. So for example, I asked my students to give me a rating on Trustpilot, whether I will send them a link to a generic company, you know, whether they give me a 5-star rating, I feel that, you know, personally, because it's for me. You know, so my organisation, my website, whatever. So it's much more rewarding being in control, and that the reward might not be financial, but it's still there, and you can choose to do as much freelancing or as little as you like. So when I started, freelancing just meant working for 3 or 4 different organisations altogether, whereas now I've got quite a complex setup where I have, you know, B2B business clients, business to student sort of stuff. So people come to me as an individual client or organisation, and again, teaching for the university, so it's very, very, very different. But it allows you to do all of those bits together. I mean, that's a positive. I mean, it also makes you an interesting person because you've got a lot to talk about. You know, I can say to somebody, you know, about teaching at university, well, that's like, I could also talk about my other interests, you know, so for example, when I started up, I did as little teaching as possible, you know, just enough sort of, you know, make money to get by, and then on the side I was, you know, learning how to trade stocks and shares. And I couldn't have done that had I taken an entry-level 9-to-5 job, or had I continued as a secondary school teacher. So that's kind of that personal choice, how you want to take things yourself. And I think autonomy is the word that sums it up in general. I guess in the negatives, there are a few. I think the biggest one is that you don't really, it's hard to switch off. So you are your own brand, you are your own marketing department, if you like. So you're kind of always on duty in that sense. And especially for me, I get lesson requests, so I'm forever checking my phone and saying, or a student might say, oh, I've got my exam this date, can you help me? I've got 3 months, can you prepare? So I've got to make a decision, I guess, if I can fit them in. So it's very hard to switch off and to take sort of extended periods of time off. So like taking a day out is very easy. You just, you know, set yourself as busy that whole day and make sure no one can schedule and book you, for example, in my line of work. So I have a calendar where students can come and book my time. I don't have to do that, but I can just put times unavailable. So taking a day off is fine, but taking a longer period, you start thinking, oh, will a client, you know, will I inconvenience the client? Is it close to their exam? Will they go somewhere else? So then that sort of comes in, and I think that's the same across probably all freelancing areas, even though we're all in quite different. So yeah, and of course your holidays aren't paid. So you might think, well, that's great, I don't want to work for a month, but then you've also got to think, well, how am I going to finance that month off? And if you're going to go somewhere exciting and exotic, then you've got to pay for that, plus the time that you're not working. So it's very easy to overcommit and to take on more work than you perhaps could or should do, and it's very hard to turn the tap off completely to stop. So that's probably what I'd say, and I imagine that's similar for everyone here, really.
Pretty much. I think the advantage of being a freelancer is also kind of the disadvantage in terms of the unpredictability. So that's great in some ways because you can do different things and every day is different and you have autonomy and you can choose what to do and when, but you also don't necessarily know how much is coming into your account every month. And like you said, you know, sometimes you're not getting paid for 4 weeks, 6 weeks after you've done the work, and you might have put out money in order to do their contracts. Like, you know, if you're hiring subcontractors, or you know, if you need equipment or travel expenses or whatever it is. So you're waiting for that to come back in. So that can be unpredictable and that can be difficult. But so I'm freelance part time, and so I have a almost full-time job alongside it, so that gives me the security. And I, at the moment, don't really want to go freelance full-time because that security allows me to pick and choose what jobs I want to do. I'm also training to be a sign language interpreter, as I said, and so I'm doing training alongside it, so that means I can be like, oh, I've got an exam coming up, so I won't take any jobs on at that time, or I'm not going to do that because I don't really want to do that contract, or I'm going on holiday, so I don't want to take the contract. And so having a almost full-time job alongside it means that I can have that security. But then, you know, then I have a boss to do stuff. You know, I have to, you know, have responsibilities. So, you know, the unpredictability of freelancing is a blessing and a curse to a certain extent.
Yeah, I'm going to echo the same thing as mine. I'm going to start with my negative because I don't want to end the line on a negative. Yeah, the uncertainty, especially when you're full-time, is, I mean, I'm a year and a half in, so I'm not established yet, per se. I mean, I've got more than enough to keep it going, but you don't know. You know, we were talking before this, I had the busiest summer ever this summer, which is quite common, and then usually in the winter it tends to drop off. People don't like spending money in December because they're spending it on Christmas. And that is common across a lot of different industries. Not all of them suffer the same way, but my industry tends to suffer from that, and it can just be terrifying when you look in your diary and you go, oh, I don't know what I'm going to do for the next 3 weeks, and then suddenly you'll get the phone call, and then it's that same panic of the uncertainty. It's the uncertainty of I've got nothing, or also the uncertainty of I've got all these things coming in. I now need to try and balance that right, and it's a terrifying lifestyle, but a fantastic lifestyle. You've got to have some real guts, I think, to do it, and that's one of the negatives and the positives, is that you've got to, if you're going to do it, you've got to do it. Because at the end of the day, you are your own boss, so if you don't do the work, it doesn't get done, and that isn't necessarily a negative, because the positive spin on that is that you haven't got to wait on someone else to do it, and if you've ever been in group projects or anything like that, you will know that waiting on other people to do things for you is a nightmare at times. And sometimes going, well, I'll just do it myself, because you're a freelancer, can be brilliant, but sometimes that leads you up to the early hours of the morning working, and that can be a negative. But I think the overall positive, it's a very cheesy one, but I get to do the thing that I love. It's all that I love to do. I love working with images and creating content, whether that's artistic or corporate. It's just what I love to do and what I love to talk about. I have other interests and other passions, but a lot of those are incorporated in, especially doing video. One of my biggest passions is motorsport. Well, I work for a couple of motorsport companies. I've done stuff for guys that build basically Formula 1 cars. I've got stuff coming in for, Aston Martin and stuff coming up, and that pairs my passions. And if I was working for a company, I may only have one focused area that I work on, and I get to diversify what I do. And that basically is what makes it all worth it. So yeah, end on a bit of a positive.
Okay, that's a good note to end on. Okay, well, thank you all very much. That was really interesting, and I hope the audience found it useful.
Thank you.